All right, welcome. It's our last, well, class is over, last meetup, official meetup. I was threatening to make a video and post, and then I ran out of time. So here we are, we'll just meet. I don't think that our discussion is gonna take that long, but I do wanna kind of open it up for questions to clarify. So I posted the final project. It's a PDF and it's an outline, and that's the one that we're going to go through. I also posted the RMD file that I used to generate that PDF, just so that you don't have to retype any questions and stuff like that. So, you can delete whatever you don't want to have in there and keep whatever you do want to have in there. I have posted a code book. It's huge. So that's why I made the code book. And so you don't have to make a code book for this one, but that's to help you get to know the data a little bit, right? Get to know the variables and get to know kind of what you're dealing with. And then of course I posted the data set as a CSV file. Okay. And so let's see here. Okay. So the PDF that I posted, it introduces the problem, okay? And so this is just the file that I just wanna go through with you guys today. And then if you have any questions that come up, I'll keep an eye on the chat, of course, or you can chime in or whatever. But before we start, I also want to have office hours, and I was thinking December 13th. I don't know if you guys have finals on that day or kind of around then, but I wanted it to be kind of closer to the due date of December 15th, where you're, probably working on it. I don't really expect you to start working on it because there's a lot going on right now. But then you've probably bit into it a little bit. Some questions have come up. And so I want to have office hours. So I'll have Zoom office hours. Oh yeah, speaking of office, I'm in my office today and it looks like I have like a messy background. That's real though. It's not a joke. It's not my desk, but it's what I get for sharing an office, I guess. So anyways, but I'm back at home, I guess. So Zoom office hours for questions on December 13th. I would love to know if that doesn't work with your guys' final exam schedule or whatever. I'm happy to move it, or post more. But for now, let's just say December 13th. And I was thinking between 10 and 2 PST. Between 10 and 2 PST. Okay. So I'll just be here hanging out. You drop in, ask questions, drop out, come back in, ask more questions maybe, I don't know. But I'll be here and it'll be first come, first serve. Usually you'll have the same questions. So it will be an open room. So I'm not going to set up the waiting room. But if you do, want to talk to me privately, then just let me know and I can, I don't know, figure that out. Or maybe we'll schedule a separate time. Okay. But it'll be drop in, first come, first served. Okay. So December 13th, then you'll probably have more applied questions. Right here, I'm just kind of introducing the problem. Okay, so it is due December 15th at basically midnight, right? 11:59, just so there's no confusion. Okay. And I want you to approach this as if you've taken on this consulting work. Okay. And so the client information, I have the client information, we can talk about that. But it's a magazine and book publishing firm. Okay. And so they have all these subscribers that they want to know what's going on with them. Okay. And so we've been given a small subset of their actual data. So they have a relational database, just means that you have, different information stored in different parts, and then you can kind of relate them to each other based off of some linkages. Don't worry about that. It means they have a huge database, that's all. And so they have 75 million customers. And so Gray Code Corporation, which I've abbreviated GCC because you don't want to say that all the time. So they do, campaigns, they do targeted marketing, they do all that kind of fun stuff. And so we've got a huge data set, and I think we have, I can't remember exactly how many, we have over 40,000 rows. Okay, so there's no way that you're going to be able to scroll through these or anything like that. You're going to want to work with them in R. You'll find that even if you try to work with them in Excel, it's going to be really, really slow, right? If you try to do stuff in Excel, it's going to be, I don't know what to do. Okay, so the main problem that we have, and I've created another problem, but the main problem that we want to solve here is how do we boost the customer response rate to renewal offers? So they're going to send out, some sort of renewal offer, and it looks like they mail it to their magazine subscribers. I guess that's fair because they're mailing the magazines. Seems weird though, but how do we boost that response rate? Okay, and so we're told that the industry response rate is about 2%, but GCC has historically performed better than that. So of course we're aiming for something higher than 2%. Okay, and so they have a model that they run, and they're finding that it's lagging a little bit, right? So it's not really keeping up with targeting the people that they are usually able to get because their response rate is a little bit lower. Okay? And so our goal is to improve their model to try to pick out the customers that are more likely to renew their subscriptions. Okay. So the file gray.csv, and I just made it a CSV file for you guys, has 38 variables. Okay, so lots of information there, and some of that is going to be irrelevant. Some of them you can cut, and that's part of the project here. Okay, and then over 40,000 rows of distinct customers. And so I posted the code book, which is for you to go through and get to know, okay, what does each variable mean, right? What's the shorthand? What does it mean? What's the description? What are some typical ranges, or for categorical variables? What is the, what are the labels? What do the labels mean? Okay. So before you start, you'd have to have a look at that and get into that a little bit. Because I didn't want to keep using kind of numerical / quantitative everywhere, it just kind of made it really boggy. So here I'm establishing the terminology that I'm using. So numerical is to mean numerical or quantitative, whichever you prefer. You're allowed to use either or. I'm just introducing how I'm using it. Categorical or qualitative, doesn't matter. The response variable means the response variable or the dependent variable, and the explanatory, we've got a couple of terms for the explanatory variable. It could be the independent variable or even the predictor. Okay. I have also told you what the response variables would be. Okay. I've picked a numerical response variable, and I've picked a categorical response variable. I picked the ones that are most likely to be the response variables. Of course, you could have other ones, but I want you to, these are the ones that I'm telling you to work with, okay? This would be a step that you would have to do if you were actually taking on this project for work, right? So then you would have to identify the response variables. But in this case, I'm just telling you what to use, and then that's kind of a jumping off point. So I picked a numerical response variable, and it's going to be the paid amount per number of issues served, which is, so that's the dollars per issue variable. And then the categorical variable, is, or response variable is whether they renewed or not when they sent out the mailing, right? And that's kind of the key question that we want to address, but I wanted to have a numerical response and a categorical one so we can choose which one you want to do. You don't have to do both, just one. Okay. There are going to be 3 components. Okay. So the final project has 3 components. There's the report. Okay. There's just answering the questions. So you're going to submit that separately. Okay. And so the report, the questions, which I've outlined, and the presentation. Okay. So I'll start with the report, then we'll go through the questions. These questions are really just meant to guide you through your analyses. You have to answer them and you have to submit your answers to all, well, not all of them, but most of them. And we'll talk about that. But you can use that as a base for your report, right? You can do that because I've set it up so that you can it can kind of jog you along here. Okay, so the report, let's see if I can maybe zoom in a little bit. There we go. Okay. So just to get a feel for things, right? Let's assume that you have agreed to do this work for $1,000. Okay. Now you have to think about, okay, so how much time does that mean for me, right? How much time should I be putting in to reasonably make $1,000, right? And so you should prepare a brief summary of your billable hours. Okay, so, and that's for me to have a look at. It's, you know, maybe 1 mark. I didn't include it in the grade scheme, but I don't think. I'll tack it onto the grade scheme. How about? But you should keep track of how much time you spend on various tasks, right? And so you can name your tasks whatever you want, kind of group headings, but just to help you, some typical categories are the preliminary research, right? So getting to know the data and kind of figuring out where you want to go with your analyses, right? This is where you would identify what your response variable is and that kind of thing, right? And so just preliminary stuff, right? Kind of gathering your tools, okay? And then your data analysis, right? Once you've figured out what you want to do, how you want your report to go, right? The story to go, then you do your data analysis, which includes a lot of Googling, right? How do I do this? How do I do this? How do I make it look like this? Right? So this is supposed to include a lot of Googling, okay? And we just umbrella term it data analysis. And then your actual report writing, right? Writing and formatting and making sure that your report looks good for your client. Okay? So your report can include things you found while you're answering the questions, and that's why the questions are there, right? But I only want you to include information that's useful or actionable to the client, okay? And so only include things that they can say, oh, okay, I didn't know that. Okay, that's interesting, right? They don't want to know, oh, 40% were male and 30% were female and the rest were unknown or something like that. They don't want to know that typically. They want to know, okay, what did you get out of it that we couldn't? Okay. And then whenever possible, use graphs instead of tables. No one wants to read tables unless they're kind of quick and easy to read tables, right? So if you're producing huge tables, then I would opt for a graphic instead, right? Some sort of graphic. And then I'm restricting you to 4 pages. Okay? That's including everything, start to finish. Okay? So I don't want you to feel like, oh, I need to crank out the words here. You know, the quicker you're able to say what you want to say, the better, right? And kind of more concise, because no one likes to read. You guys don't like to read. Clients don't want to read. No one wants to read. So the quicker that you can get the information to the client and they have what they need, that's what they're paying for, right? So I want you to kind of be really, really concise. Yeah. I haven't seen any questions yet. So far, so good, probably. Let's see here. So
I'll
I've
just
got
say
the
that
grades.
the billable hours thing is a little weird because you know, the majority of my time is spent just learning, you know, what data science is, right?
Yeah, that would be in your preliminary research or your data analysis, depending
It would
on.
be like preliminary. And anyways,
Well, yeah, but that's part of it, right?
okay.
Yeah. So when you take on a project, right, it's the client's hiring you because they don't know how to do it.
Mhm.
So if you think you don't need to know exactly how to do it, but you have to have some idea of what you want to do and kind of figure out a plan, right? Is that?
Yeah, I just you know, you know, it's going to take me a while. You know, it'll probably equate to like minimum wage or something, but you know, it's okay.
Well, so I picked 1,000 just kind of randomly because then you have a pretty good idea of, you know, what's expected, I think.
How many hours do you think this should take the average student?
The average student, well, so it depends. I mean, let's see here. How much do you want to charge an hour?
$1,000.
$1,000 an hour. Be done in an hour. You got it. You'll be the most famous data scientist out there. Just crank it out. Even like top of their fields get paid. It used to be $1,000 a day. So I don't know. So so even kind of top notch, let's see here. And just I just picked $1,000 because I didn't want to put the pressure on, right? I didn't want to say, oh yeah, you're charging $10,000. Can you imagine what type of report you'd have to put out for $10,000, right? So I wanted to show you that, okay, you have to spend about $1,000 worth of your time, right? And so even, you know, for a professional at $1,000 a day, 8 hours a day, that's $125 an hour. You probably can't charge that, right? When you're first starting out. So, and that's what you guys are doing. So let's say, I don't know, reasonably, I think, well, I have no idea right now. Top of my game, I think I was charging 60 an hour. You don't get that much. Wages have increased now. That was a while ago, but let's say at 40 an hour, should be spending 25 hours on this. It's kind of what I'm expecting. So, but it's good to see, because until you've recorded how much time you spend on each thing, right, then it's hard to kind of pinpoint. And you can totally, like, do I care how much time you spent on it? No. If you're able to put something together in 4 hours, good for you. But I'm expecting it to take, you know, about 25-ish, if that sounds good.
Good. I make no promises about that number, but
No, and I don't, it's not something that I'm expecting I don't have a number of hours in mind, but I think it's a good exercise to kind of have a full project ahead of you and just kind of keep track as you go. Because typically what you would do is you would have to submit your timeline in advance. Oh, in 2 weeks, I'll have this done. And so you need to be able to know, kind of gauge how long it takes you to do each thing, right? So that's why I incorporated it. It's really just meant to be kind of for fun. Oh yeah, any other questions about that? Because that's the first time that we're doing that. But I was kind of in project mode, so it's like, and billable hours.
Yeah, no, makes sense so far. I guess we so you gave us the the response variables, and then we just have to decide what we think would be good explanatory variables.
Yeah, and I've even in the questions I've outlined some
hints,
research questions. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll guide you along. So there's going to be kind of a path laid out. Oh yeah, so then, yeah, let me know if there's any other questions about that, because I do want, it's new, so we haven't done it before, but I think it's going to be a good exercise. And if you end up, making $5 an hour, then my apologies, but I think you're going to be okay. Yeah. You don't make any money. I want to be very clear. I'm not paying you to do this work. Okay. So we've got some criteria, and it's going to be on a 0-1, potentially 2 scale. Sometimes it's a yes/no situation. Okay, and so in your report, you have to introduce the problem and how you propose that you're going to solve this problem. Okay, so just kind of outline, that's an overview of everything that you did. And so very generic criteria here, right? But it's just a matter of how you want to write your report. It's a story that you're telling. So the tricky part about data science is, and kind of analytics, is that it is a kind of a dance, right? And so you have to be kind of creative with your reporting, but also analytical with how you report things, right? And so I want you to introduce the problem and tell me how you are going to solve this problem. Okay. Visualizations, like I said, I want you to focus on visualizations rather than tables, and whether they're well done. Do they look good? And do they tell the story? Right. And then provides a solution for the client. Do you have a solution? Do you have an answer for them that you were paid to do? And then just kind of on a 0-1-2 scale. And then on the 0-1 scale, this is an all or nothing situation, so that can get a little tricky. Obviously, I can go between the two, but I think it's good to have a clear-cut yes/no situation. Okay, well written and well organized. I lump those two together. And that's just, when I'm reading your report, are you leading me through the story? Right. And that's it. The overall look and feel, right? What does this thing, when I pick it up, am I excited to read it, or I'm not picking it up physically, it's on my computer, but let's pretend I'm picking it up, right? Am I curious to read this thing, or does it just look terrible, right? And so there's only so much you can do, but as long as it looks clean and organized, then that's good. Less than 4 pages, because that was a criteria, okay? And would I say that it's worth $1,000, right? regardless of how much time you spent on it, you need to be able to charge $1,000 because that's what you agreed to, right? Do you feel comfortable charging $1,000? And that's going to be, would I feel that it's worth $1,000? And that's off of, roughly 25 hours, not in terms of the billable hours, but in terms of the effort that I'm seeing there, right? So you can't just whip something up in 5 hours. Oh, I spent, a whole afternoon on this. What happened? Well,
$1,000 or $500 an hour, or $200
yeah,
an hour.
yeah. So you got to think about it a little bit, right? And you can tell pretty quickly how much thought has gone into a report, right? So, and I know that you guys are, starting out, we're building up your reporting skills. And so I'm, my expectations are realistic. Okay. But this is our first full-fledged project. Okay. Potentially. Maybe you've done full-on projects in other classes, but with me. Okay. So that's the grade scheme that I'm going to go with. If something comes up, I reserve the right to add or take away marks, but usually that is to boost your marks as a class. If I see something that I like that I didn't incorporate here, I usually add it in and give you some marks for it. But this is what I came up with now. Okay. So the questions, these questions, they're meant to lead you through your analyses. You don't have to use them, but if you're kind of stumped, then these are here to kind of guide you along. So I have it broken up by chapter just so you can refer back to each chapter. You have to complete all the questions from chapters 2 through 6. So that's for everyone has to do those. Okay. And then you're going to pick one of chapter 7 or chapter 9 and do all the questions from that chapter. Okay. So, you have to read them both and figure out which one you want to tackle. Okay. And the chapter 7 one, let's see here. This is for the numerical. And then chapter 9 is for the categorical variable. So it really depends on if you want to be doing a linear regression or if you want to do a logistic regression with classification. So I don't know. Curious to know which one you guys pick. But so it's up to you. You have to do all the questions from chapter 2 through 6, and then one of 7 or 9. Okay. We don't have a time variable. So we can't do chapter 8, which is time series. Okay. But besides that, we can cover all the other chapters. Just so it's easier for me to read, because you're submitting these questions in a question answer situation. Okay, so much like an assignment. And so I want you to clearly state the question followed by your answer. And the answers preferably are in point form. You don't have to, but just so that it's easy for me to kind of pick up on the key points. You have to submit your questions in order, because I'm just going to look through them and just bang them out. Okay. And then you have to show your R code, right, that you use to answer the questions. Oh, and I think I should add here, oops. Work in an RMD file and submit a PDF. I'll add that in later and re-upload, but that should be kind of implied, but that's what I want. Okay. So what's the lay of the land here? Chapter 2. I want you to first go through and I want you to identify all the numerical variables and then just look at the summary statistics, right? Just kind of get a feel for the data. You don't have to talk about it, just have a look at it. Of course, I'm expecting you to look at it, okay? But you don't have to discuss it or anything, just provide it. Then identify all the categorical variables in the data set and provide tables summarizing the proportions in each category. You could look at, some two-way tables if you wanted to, but I'm going to lead you there anyways. So for now, let's just focus on summarizing the individual categorical variables. Again, you don't have to discuss it or anything, just give it to me, okay? Here's where the discussion comes in. If there are any variables you feel should be removed from the analysis based on these numerical summaries, right? Clearly state them here along with the reason that you would remove them, right? So you can't just say, oh, I had to remove this one and then just leave it at that. You have to tell me why, right? And justify. But we are aiming to remove some of these variables. We have 38 variables. There's no way we can talk about, so yeah. There's no way we can talk about all of them, right? And some of them are going to be uninteresting, right? So the goal is to pare down our data just to kind of have some key variables that we want to focus on, right? And so, so if you see any variables where there's not going to be a lot of information given to you from those variables, you can remove those, for example, right? But here's another one of those open-ended things. As long as you justify to me why you want to remove these variables, you can do that, right? As long as your justification is sound, right? So as long as what you're telling me makes sense, then sure, go ahead, remove them. Okay? So then you can proceed with just the new subset of your data. So you can ignore those variables. If you've told me, hey, I'm going to ignore these from here on out, great. Okay? So then you can move on to chapter 3. Here, you're going to use data visualizations for the numerical response variables and their relationship between the other variables. Okay? So things like scatter plots, especially if you have, so the numerical response variable, I think was the proportion of paid, let me scroll back up there. It's all bouncing around here. Oh yeah, the paid amount per number of issues served. So that's going to be your numerical response variable. How does it relate to the other variables in your data set? And remember, you're focusing on the ones that you kept in your data set from chapter 2, right? So you don't want to look at all of them. You want to find some that you can say, oh, I don't really need that moving forward. Okay, things like scatter plots. If you have two numerical variables, it might be nice to see their relationship. Okay. And side-by-side box plots. If you have the response variable on your y-axis and you have a categorical variable, that's a nice way to visualize that relationship among the categories, right? And so, and then I said, et cetera, because there are other things that you could do, but those are the ones that I would focus on, right? And so, and the goal here is to try to identify key variables that are going to help you analyze the numerical response variable. Okay? And I do want to see a discussion here, just if there is a relationship, right? If you see something interesting, see something, say something, right? So if you see something interesting, then briefly discuss it, right? I'll say here, briefly. Not a huge discussion, but highlight any key findings that you see. Then use data visualizations to identify key variables to focus on when analyzing the categorical response variable. Maybe I'll highlight here. Okay. So if you have a categorical response variable, then you can look at side-by-side bar charts, for example, side-by-side box plots. If you have a numerical variable that you want to compare it against, you can look at scatter plots if you want to get those logistic regression kind of ... situations. You can do that. And then leaving it open-ended, but those are the ones I would focus on. Okay. And when you see something interesting, just tell me about it, just briefly, and that'll be good. Part C, again, so now you have seen the data, you've looked at it, you've visualized things. Now, if there are any variables you feel should be removed from the analysis, for example, if you've made side-by-side box plots and all the boxes look the same for every category, or roughly the same, there's no real distinction, that's not going to give you anything. Oh yeah, all these categories look the same for this numerical response variable. That's not interesting, right? And so so then you can go ahead and remove that, right? Because it's not going to contribute anything. Okay, so if you see something where there's really nothing going on, or very little going on, and you think, it's probably, there are better variables in there, then you're welcome to remove them. Okay. Based on your visualizations, clearly state them here along with the reasons that you would remove them, or reason. And then you can work with an even smaller subset of the original data from here on out, right? And so so then you can do your analysis with your final subset, right? And so that's what you're going to head into chapter 4 with. Okay. So in chapter 4, we're going to consider each categorical variable. Okay, and I want you to identify the category that had the highest proportion of customers who renewed their magazine subscription in response to the mailing. So that's going to be a two-way table, right? Where you're going to have the renewal variable on one side. It can be, the columns or the rows. I typically have it in the rows, doesn't matter. And then you're going to have your other categorical variable probably in the column, right? Or other way around. Okay, and so what you're looking for is you're trying to identify the category that had the highest proportion of renewals, right? Because that's the one that we're interested in. Okay? And so so from each variable, there's going to be some category with, okay, these guys renewed, okay, these guys renewed. Okay. So then I want you to put that together and say, okay, based on these categorical variables, what's the typical profile of a customer who renews their magazine subscription, right? Who is this customer? Who is this ideal customer based on the data? Okay. Chapter 5. I want you to, so that's the clustering chapter. So now we're going to use clustering to identify 3 clusters, kind of similar to what we did with the categorical data here in chapter 4. But now we're looking at numerical variables because we're using k-means clustering, and means only apply to numerical data, right? And so I want you to identify 3 clusters. So I'm telling you, let k equal 3. And create 3 clusters based off of this, of the remaining numerical variables, right? Not all of them, because that's way too many. You've reduced your data set, and that's the one you're working with. Then I want you to provide the typical profile of each cluster, right? What's the, I think it gives you the mean in each variable, right? And that's what I'm looking for. And then which cluster has the highest mean paid amount per number of issues served, right? And that's the numerical response variable. So which cluster should we be targeting here, right? And what are some of their characteristics? Chapter 6. So this is the one I made up. I made up a numerical variable so that, or not a numerical variable. I made up a question that we could answer for the numerical variable. And it's just to get you to practice some hypothesis testing and confidence intervals. So in previous years, no, it's okay. GCC has found that the mean paid amount per number of issues served has been 78 cents. Does this data provide evidence that there's been a change in the mean paid amount per number of issues served, right? So this is going to be a one sample means question, right? And we're going to do a t-test. So conduct an appropriate hypothesis test to answer this question. You must interpret the results. You can't just give me the output. You have to tell me what your conclusion is and what does that mean for the client. Okay? And then part of that output is going to be a confidence interval, right? So then you don't have to reconstruct it. You can grab it from part A, but I want you to give me the appropriate confidence interval to answer this question. So use this confidence interval to answer this hypothesis testing question, and you must interpret the results. You have to interpret this confidence interval. Okay. So those are the questions that you have to answer, right? And then you're going to pick one of chapter 7 or chapter 9 to focus on, right? And you don't have to do both, just one, okay? So you might have to kind of try them out, right? See which one you feels better, right? But from chapter 7, I want you to randomly sample 5,000 observations and assign them to a test set. Okay, so now we're doing cross-validation, and there's lots of ways that you can construct your cross-validation sets, okay, but you can Google your way to them. And so here, maybe I'll say, Google creating test and training set or something like that in R. Maybe I should change my pen so it's smaller. Hard to see. Wonder if I can do that like this. Hey. Cool. Not sure it helped, but whatever. Hopefully easier to read. So we're going to split our data set, right? We have our data set. It has over 40,000 rows, and we're going to take a random sample of 5,000 of those, and we're going to parking lot them as a test set. Then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take 5,000 observations, another random 5,000 observations, and we're going to parking lot that as the validation set. Okay. The remaining observations are going to make up your training set. We talked about fancier ways that we could construct these sets, right? But we're going to have these static training set, validation set, test set. Okay. So then using your training set, that's where you're going to build your models, right? So identify 4 competing models that best predict the paid amount per number of issues served using your training set. Okay? And here I'm telling you to use the multiple R squared as the performance measure. What are you looking for? you're looking to maximize your multiple R squared, right? So here, you want to maximize R squared. Even though I only want you to give me 4 competing models, that's after probably looking at 20 or so models, right? Try different combinations, try different things, try different variables in there, and then you give me your 4 best models, okay? Being really careful not to overfit the model. You don't want to have too many variables in there, but just play around with it, and everyone's going to have different models, and that's okay, right? That's the point. So you're going to identify 4 competing models, and the goal is to predict the paid amount per number of issues served. Okay? And I'm even telling you what to use to compare your models. Okay? Then I want you to apply those models, those 4 models that you've identified, to the validation set. Okay? And this is where you pick your winning model. Again, you're going to use the multiple R squared as the performance measure. These R squareds in your validation sets are not going to be as high as they were on the training set, because we use the training set to build the models, right? But now we're taking that model and we're plunking it down on a new set, right? A new data set. And so our R squared is going to decrease, but you want to pick the one that has the highest R squared. Okay, that's going to be your winning model. Okay, the one with the highest R squared. So then you apply the winning model to the test set, right? So now you take that winning model, that one winning model, and you apply it to the test set. Okay, and you report the multiple R squared. Again, it's going to be probably quite low in comparison to when you saw it in the training set, right? But that's because it's working on unseen data. It doesn't know how it behaves, okay? And that's the multiple R squared that you're going to be reporting, okay? Then I want you to interpret the coefficients in the winning model here, right? You want to make your life easier. You don't want to have 15 variables in your model, because then you have to interpret 15 of them, right? And it's likely that you're overfitting. Okay, so you have to interpret all the coefficients, each of them individually in the winning model. Okay. And here, so it's gonna get a little bit weird here, but if GCC sends targeted marketing to the top 10% of the test set, okay, so that the winning model predicts to have the highest paid amount per number of issues served. So you're going to have a predicted value for the paid amount per number of issues served. You take the top 10% of those and you give me the average. Okay. What's the expected paid amount per number of issues served? Remember, the expected is the mean, right? So that's the average. And how does that top 10% compare to the overall average of the paid amount per number of issues served, right, in the test set, right? So you're gonna predict the outcome for each observation in the test set, and then you're gonna take the top 10% of those predictions, and so the highest 10%, what's the average there? And then compare that average to the overall average, right? And is this group that much better? Okay. So that's if you want to deal with your numerical variable, right? So here you're focusing on the numerical variable. Oops. I always drop the R in variable. Okay, so chapter 8, we don't have a time variable, so we can't do a time series analysis. Oh, bummer, right? Oh, well, I will live. Chapter 9, this is our categorical variable. you won't get away from that, the cross validation. So you take out your test set, you still have to have a test set, you still have to split off your validation set, and you still have to use the remainder for your training set, right? So that's the exact same situation. And then we're going to identify 4 competing logistic regression classification models, okay, to identify customers who are likely to respond to a mailing, right? So that you predict are going to be ones in the renewal category, right? And I want you to, for simplicity, we're going to use the Akeki information criteria, the AIC, as the performance measure. And we want to, which color did I use here? Minimize the AIC. Okay. So the model that minimizes the AIC, that's the one that you pick. So it depends on what performance measure you're using, and you have to keep track of which one's which, but here I'm telling you. Okay. There are better performance measures, but they don't come with the default output. So I wanted to use something that's in the default output. So I'll use the AIC. Yeah. So again, identify 4 usually means, you know, you've looked at 20+ models, you've played around with it, and you've picked your top 4. Okay. Then you're going to apply those models to the validation set to identify the winning model again. And we're still going to use the AIC as a performance measure. Yeah. Then you take your winning model. This is the one, and you apply it to your test set. And you're going to report the AIC, and that's the one, that the AIC that you're allowed to report. Okay. I'm telling you to use a cutoff value of 0.5. And then I want you to construct a confusion matrix for the winning model. Okay. And then I want you to make a table to summarize the overall class 1 and class 0 error rates. And there's a table in the summary notes, in the chapter 9 summary notes, that you can use as a guide. So that's what I'm looking for. And maybe I can find it here. 99999. Oh yeah. So something like this. So here they're using a cutoff value of 0.75. It doesn't have to look like this, but the same information. I want the same information there. So then here's your confusion matrix, right? The actual class versus the predicted class. And then the actual class of 0, 1, or overall, the number of cases in each class, the number of errors, and each of the error rates. Okay. So something inspired by this table here. Yeah. Maybe I'll copy. Can do that. I'll put it down here. There. Okay. If GCC sends targeted marketing to the top 10% of the test set that the winning model believes is most likely to renew, so you're going to have your predicted probability of renewing, right? And so you're going to take the top 10% of those, right? The ones who are most likely to renew based off of your predictions. And what's the expected response rate? How many of those would you expect to respond? Okay. And then how does that compare to the industry's average response rate of 2%? Okay. And so for these questions, they're each going to be just marked out of 1. I know some of them are a lot more work than the others, but that's to boost your grades basically. right? So those quick and easy ones, right? You'll get ones. And if you're finding yourself really struggling through some questions, just remember they're still out of one, right? And so because they're just here to help you guide your report, right? If you want it. Yeah. Okay. So grade out of 1. If it's not done at all or inaccurate, completely inaccurate, then you get 0. Partially complete, you get a half. And then if it's complete, even if it's, slightly off, I'll still give you 1 if it, the most of it was there, right? So kind of harsh grade scheme, right? But also nice because the easy stuff is also only worth 1. Okay. And then finally, your presentation. I want to see you present just the same as we've been doing, less than 5 minutes. And you're just blabbing your results to the client. Well, not blabbing, you should be professional about it. But for the most part, it's going to be a yes, no situation. Did you do it or did you not? And yeah, some of it is, me deciding, it's subjective, but so for example, is it engaging? When I see you presenting, am I following along? Am I interested, right? Is the pace kind of high? Yes or no? The video has to show your face and your slides. You guys have been good about that. Is it professional, right? So is this something that you would submit to a client, a paying client, right? Effective use of time is basically, did you say what you needed to say in less than 5 minutes? Good. Explain technical terms as necessary, right? You can't assume that anyone knows or remembers their statistics, for example, right? And math, if you come across some kind of upper level, you're allowed to assume that they know what the average is, for example, right? But anything else you'd have to explain. Just the slides, are they well done? Are they well prepared? Right? And then do your slides support your statements, right? Or you just have slides and you just talk about something else? Or are you referring to the slides and kind of guiding the viewer through them, right? And then your graphics and your visualizations, you're allowed to use the same ones as you had in the report. So again, are they well done? Are they easy to read? That type of thing. And then finally, I had a sum category in here. So the presentation adds value to the client. What did they pay for? Was it worth paying for, right? And so that's on a 0, 1, 2 scale for a total out of 10. Okay. I think that's it. Any questions coming to mind off the bat? Oh, it's due on December 15th. I'll scroll up to the top because there was some, if you came in. So I know this is why I wanted to have office hours and I set them up for the 13th. You're welcome to reach out at any time and I can, help you out, but I'll be here just, open. It'll be drop in on December 13th between 10 and 2, and stop by if you have any questions or there's something that, you need a little bit of help on. That's great.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
Was it, I don't know how to pronounce it, the AIC,
Oh, yeah.
Aikiako, whatever.
Yeah, the Akeki, I think.
Yeah, Aiki, whatever. In one of my previous projects, I don't think you've marked it yet, but I actually used that as a performance measure for a numerical regression analysis?
You can.
You can?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
I mean, I was still dissatisfied with the results, but I was okay to use it for that. So we're good.
Yeah, very good. Well, it's a final project. Of course, it's going to take a lot of time. But yeah, but I've set up the questions to help guide you through it. I know that it's a lot of work, but got this. It's all built up to this.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye.
See ya. Any other questions? If there are no questions, then I'm all done. I'll stop this recording here. I want to thank you for a great term, and good luck with the project. I'll finish this recording here. Hang on.